15. Black celebrities battling serious health issues you didn't know about. Black excellence has always been about more than fame. It's about resilience, innovation, and breaking barriers against all odds. From pioneers in music, film, and literature to athletes and activists, these legends have shaped culture while facing challenges unseen by the public eye. Their stories remind us that true greatness includes courage, perseverance, and the ability to rise above adversity. But as we celebrate these achievements, a question emerges. Does society truly recognize the struggles behind the glory, or do we only admire the spotlight moments? What do you think? Are we honoring the full story of Black excellence? Denzel Washington. Denzel Washington has long been the kind of figure we picture as unshakable, the steady center of films that shaped whole eras. From the righteous fire of Malcolm X to the quiet thunder of Fences, he built a career on control of voice posture, gaze, and the emotional temperature of every scene. That's why the most recent chapter of his health life lands with such weight. It isn't a tabloid mystery or a vague industry whisper. It's a real specific setback he shared himself in his own plain-spoken way, and it reminds us that even the most disciplined bodies can surprise us. Earlier this year, Denzel revealed he suffered a serious tongue injury. He described it as nearly biting it in half. The damage didn't resolve overnight. It lingered, affecting how clearly he can speak and how comfortably he can deliver lines. For an actor whose power often lives inside cadence and diction, that kind of wound is not a small inconvenience. It can reshape the entire performance process. It changes breath timing and the confidence that comes from knowing your instrument will respond when you need it. And yet, typical Denzel, he didn't wrap it in panic. He treated it like a fact of life. You adjust, you train differently, and you keep showing up. He's also been increasingly reflective about the mileage a life can put on a person. Washington has spoken about stepping away from alcohol later in life after years of heavy use, framing the decision not as a redemption headline, but as a quiet act of self-respect. He doesn't glamorize the past. He acknowledges that habits have consequences, even if your public image still looks polished. There's a seasoned man honesty in the way he talks now, less about proving toughness, more about protecting what time can still give you. Have you ever had a moment where your body forced you to slow down even when your heart wanted to push ahead? What's crucial, especially in today's rumor economy, is separating truth from noise. There is no confirmed report that Denzel is battling a secret terminal illness. The reality we can point to is grounded and human: a significant oral injury, a sober reckoning with earlier choices, and the natural recalibration that comes with being in your 70s while still chasing demanding work. In that sense, his story isn't about a superstar falling. It's about a man aging in real time, choosing clarity over denial. The strength isn't in pretending nothing hurts. It's in adjusting your pace without surrendering your purpose and showing the rest of us that dignity can look like slowing down, then standing tall anyway. Janet Jackson. Janet Jackson's career has always been built on precision, smooth vocals, exact choreography, and a calm authority that made an arena feel intimate. For many Americans who grew up in the 80s and 90s, she wasn't Michael's little sister. She was the architect of her own sound and style, the woman who turned pop into a statement of independence. So when she hit pause for health reasons, it felt like a shock, not because she looked weak, but because she'd always looked so in control. In late 2015, mid Unbreakable tour, Janet announced that doctors required surgery and she had to postpone dates. She didn't share the exact medical issue, choosing privacy over headlines. Almost instantly, online gossip tried to fill in the blanks, including a widely spread claim that she had throat cancer. Janet shut that down herself, telling fans to trust only her words and confirming she did not have cancer. The episode became a clear example of how silence can be twisted into fake narratives. It's also worth remembering what a Janet show demands. She performs like an athlete, non-stop movement, intricate dance routines, and vocals that still need to land cleanly. Touring at that level takes a toll even when you're well. After her procedure and recovery, she made another choice that mattered just as much, stepping back to focus on family. She waited longer than many expected to return to the road, and in 2017, she welcomed her son Isa at age 50, embracing motherhood on her own timeline. When Janet finally returned to performing, she did it with steadier pacing and a renewed sense of purpose. The message of Unbreakable felt less like a tour title and more like a life philosophy. She showed that strength isn't staying on stage at all costs. Sometimes it's knowing when to step away, heal in peace, and come back only when you're ready. No apologies, no spectacle, just quiet survival and enduring grace. Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg has always looked like someone nobody could knock down. For decades, she's been the sharpest voice in the room, on stage, on screen, and on television, mixing humor with a kind of hard-won honesty that made people feel she was indestructible. That's why her health crisis a few years ago stunned so many fans. It wasn't a slow decline you saw coming. It was a sudden collapse that nearly ended her life. In 2019, Whoopi disappeared from the view without much warning. When she returned, she explained that what started as pneumonia spiraled into something far more dangerous, double pneumonia, that progressed to sepsis. She described it as a near-death experience. At one point, doctors told her she was extremely close to not making it. The recovery was not glamorous. She has spoken about being unable to walk for a period, needing oxygen support, and feeling like her body had betrayed her. For someone whose career depends on presence, voice timing, physical energy being reduced to fighting for breath was both terrifying and humbling. That episode also changed how she talks about health in public. Whoopi didn't treat it like celebrity drama. She treated it like a warning. She urged people to take respiratory symptoms seriously, to respect fatigue instead of brushing it off, and to understand that infections can turn lethal fast, especially as we age. She's been candid that the illness rewired her sense of time. Work matters, sure, but not more than your lungs, your heart, or your ability to wake up tomorrow. Have you ever ignored a small sickness, only to realize later it wasn't small at all? What makes Whoopi's story powerful isn't only that she survived, it's how she came back without pretending she was untouched. She returned to her chair with a deeper softness, a slower pace when needed, and a clearer boundary around rest. In a culture that worships grind and constant performance, her experience reminds us that real strength sometimes looks like stepping away, admitting fear, and choosing recovery over pushing through. Whoopi Goldberg didn't just beat an illness, she turned it into testimony. Life is fragile, laughter is precious, and there's no fame big enough to cancel mortality. Serena Williams. Serena Williams didn't just dominate tennis. She redefined what dominance could look like. From the late 1990s onward, she became a symbol of power, focus, and competitive fire, collecting 23 Grand Slam singles titles and turning pressure into fuel. To fans who watched her grow from Compton prodigy to global icon, she seemed carved out of something stronger than ordinary human limits. And yet the most terrifying match of her life happened not under stadium lights, but in a hospital room after she became a mother. In September 2017, following the birth of her daughter, Serena felt a familiar danger. Years earlier, she had experienced blood clots, so when she sensed shortness of breath and sharp chest pain, she knew something was wrong. She insisted on tests, even when her concerns were brushed aside at first. That insistence likely saved her life. Doctors found a pulmonary embolism, a clot lodged in her lungs. The treatment that followed was brutal. She endured multiple blood thinner injections, coughing fits that reopened her C-section wound, and a second emergency procedure to prevent more clots. Imagine the whiplash: one moment you're celebrating new life, the next you're fighting for your own. What's striking is how Serena talks about that period. She doesn't frame it as a tragic footnote. She frames it as a lesson in self-advocacy, especially for Black women whose pain is too often minimized. She has publicly emphasized that she had to be loud, specific, and persistent to get the care she needed, and she encourages others to do the same. In the years since she has used her platform to raise awareness about maternal health risks and postpartum warning signs, stressing that strength isn't just physical, it's also the courage to demand help. Serena returned to professional tennis after recovery, but she was clear that the comeback wasn't about proving anything to the world. It was about reclaiming her body and her life on new terms. Her story reminds us that even the greatest champions are mortal, and that survival sometimes depends on listening to your instincts when everything around you says you're fine. Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson's voice is one of the most recognizable in American film Gravely Electric and impossible to ignore. For audiences who've followed him from Do the Right Thing to Pulp Fiction to Marvel's universe, he often feels like a force of nature, sharp, fearless, and eternally in motion. But long before he became the man who never stumbles, Jackson was fighting a private war that nearly erased his future. In the 1970s and 1980s, while his talent was real, his life was unstable. He has spoken openly about being consumed by cocaine and alcohol during those years, to the point that his family staged an intervention. That turning point led him into rehab in 1991. He has called sobriety the most important role he's ever played because, unlike a movie part, this one demanded daily discipline with no director yelling "cut." Recovery didn't instantly make him famous either. It gave him the foundation to stay alive long enough for fame to arrive. Not long after treatment, he landed breakout work that set his career on fireproof, that sometimes the comeback happens quietly before the world ever applauds it. Have you ever watched someone rebuild their life from the ground up and thought, if they can do it, maybe I can too? What makes Jackson's story so compelling for older viewers is that it doesn't pretend addiction is a youthful phase you simply grow out of. He has described it as a disease that can hollow out your identity, ruin relationships, and leave lasting wear on the body. Even decades later, he acknowledges that past excess has consequences on energy, stamina, and the kind of health you can't always measure with a camera flashing in your face. Yet he refuses shame. He treats honesty as part of the healing. That candor is rare among stars who built their image on toughness, and it's one reason so many people trust him beyond the characters he plays. Samuel L. Jackson's legacy isn't only the performances we quote. It's the life he chose when the other path was easier and darker. He became proof that survival can be louder than any line in a script, and that your second act can be the one that makes history. Toni Braxton. Toni Braxton has always sounded like velvet wrapped around steel. When her voice first climbed the charts in the early 90s, it carried heartbreak with such control that listeners felt she was singing directly into their living rooms. To many fans now in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, Toni's music is stitched into weddings, divorces, late-night drives, and quiet moments of survival. That's why her health journey hits so hard. The same instrument that made her a legend is the very thing illness has tried to steal. For years, Toni lived with symptoms she couldn't explain: extreme fatigue, aching joints, flare-ups that left her drained for days. In 2008, she publicly confirmed what she had been battling privately: lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease where the immune system attacks healthy tissue. Lupus doesn't move in a straight line. It can be quiet for months, then suddenly turn cruel, affecting muscles, skin organs, and especially stamina. For a touring vocalist, that unpredictability is terrifying. Toni has described days when standing felt like lifting concrete, and nights when breathing through a performance took everything she had. She has also spoken about how the disease contributed to complications around her heart, adding another layer of risk to a life already lived under pressure. What makes Toni's story different from a typical celebrity struggle is how transparent she's been about the cost. She's canceled shows when flare-ups hit, not out of weakness, but because lupus teaches you to respect limits or pay for it later. She's talked about medication routines, hospital visits, and the emotional toll of never fully trusting your own energy from one morning to the next. At the same time, she has refused to let the disease define her identity. Instead, she's used her platform to raise awareness, especially for Black women who are diagnosed at higher rates and often face delayed treatment because their pain is dismissed. Toni Braxton's resilience isn't loud or theatrical. It's the kind that looks like choosing rest without guilt, choosing honesty without shame, and still walking on stage when she can, knowing every note is a victory. Her voice remains a gift, but her courage in protecting that gift may be her greatest performance of all. Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou was never simply a poet. She was a moral compass in a human voice, someone who could turn personal pain into a language big enough for an entire country to recognize itself. For audiences who remember the civil rights era, her presence felt like a steady hand on the shoulder, firm, wise, and full of lived truth. That's why her later years carry such quiet weight. Behind the public honor, the awards, and the roar of standing ovations, her body was gradually tightening its grip on her time. As she aged, Angelou faced serious physical decline. Friends and associates described her as coping with ongoing health complications that limited mobility and endurance, including cardiovascular and breathing-related problems in her final period. She often used a wheelchair and appeared less frequently, not because her spirit dimmed, but because the body that carried her for 8 decades was slowing down. Yet even when fatigue pressed in, she resisted being reduced to fragility. She continued to write, to speak when she could, and to show up for causes she believed in. For her, the work was never a performance, it was a responsibility. Have you ever seen someone keep giving to the world even when their strength was running out and felt both inspired and heartbroken at the same time? What makes Maya's story so relevant to older viewers isn't a single dramatic medical episode. It's the long, human reality of living while the body changes its rules. She knew the price of pain early in life, racism, trauma, displacement, loss, and she never sold a fantasy of effortless triumph. Instead, she modeled perseverance that was honest about scars. In her final years, that honesty became even more powerful. She didn't hide that aging can be hard, or that breathing, walking, and recovering take more from you each year. She simply refused to let those truths silence her. When she passed in 2014 at age 86, the world mourned a legend. But what remains is more than memory. Her life stands as proof that greatness isn't the absence of suffering, it's what you choose to build with it. Even as her body weakened, her words stayed upright. And for anyone facing their own aging, illness, or loss, Maya Angelou leaves a simple, enduring lesson. You may bend, you may tire, but you can still rise. Tracy Morgan. Tracy Morgan has always been comedy with a heartbeat, fast, unpredictable, a little reckless, and somehow deeply human. To people who watched him on Saturday Night Live or 30 Rock, Tracy wasn't just funny. He was the wild card who made the scene feel alive. His style came from sheer momentum, big laughs, bigger energy, a man who looked like he could outrun anything life threw at him. Then came a night that stopped that momentum cold. In June 2014, Tracy's limousine was struck on a New Jersey highway by a Walmart truck traveling at high speed. The crash killed his friend and fellow comedian James McNair and left Tracy in critical condition. He suffered a traumatic brain injury, multiple broken bones, and internal damage so severe that doctors placed him in a coma for roughly 2 weeks. When he woke, the road back wasn't a Hollywood montage. It was slow, painful, and frighteningly uncertain. He had to relearn basic movement, rebuild balance, and wrestle with memory gaps that made familiar things feel strange. Recovery wasn't only physical. Brain trauma often brings mood swings, anxiety, and a sense that the self you knew has shifted slightly out of place. Tracy has admitted that some days he didn't recognize the man he used to be, and that fear could be as heavy as any cast or brace. What makes Tracy's journey so moving is how public his rebuilding became without turning into self-pity. He returned to the stage trembling at first, walking carefully, speaking about the accident not as a punchline but as a fact. Humor didn't vanish, it evolved. The laughter after his comeback carried a different weight because it was tethered to gratitude and grief at the same time. He has talked about ongoing pain, slower days, and the reality that healing from a brain injury isn't a finish line you cross once. It's a lifelong adjustment. Tracy Morgan's story matters because it shows how joy can survive catastrophe. He didn't erase what happened. He carried it, learned its shape, and still found a way to make people laugh this time, not just because he's hilarious, but because he's still here. Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy's rise was so fast and so bright that it reshaped American comedy in real time. For many viewers who lived through the 1980s, Eddie wasn't just a star, he was the weather system of pop culture. Saturday Night Live. 48. Hers Beverly Hills Cop. Coming to America, he made the country laugh, then made it move to his rhythm. He carried a youthful, unstoppable spark that felt like it could run forever. But one of the most serious health battles Eddie faced didn't show up as a headline diagnosis. It showed up as something quieter, more familiar to anyone who has ever carried too much for too long: burnout. By his mid-20s, Eddie was already living inside a machine that never slowed down. Movie sets, press tours, stand-up specials, studio meetings, expectations that every new project had to be bigger than the last one, year after year. He has described the era as exhausting and isolating, the kind of pressure that looks glamorous from the outside but can hollow you out privately. Even without a named condition, chronic stress at that scale is a health issue in its own right. It affects sleep, mood, appetite, your immune system, and your sense of who you are when you're not on. For Eddie, the warning sign wasn't a single collapse. It was the growing feeling that his life was being lived for the spotlight instead of for himself. So he did something almost unheard of for a man at his peak. He stepped away. Not for a week, not for a reset, for years. He focused on family, on breathing room, on being a regular human being again. The world kept talking about him, sometimes even mocking the silence, but that silence was the point. He has said in later interviews that leaving was about protecting his mind and spirit, not chasing the next trophy. Have you ever looked at your life and realized you needed to pause before the pace broke you? When Eddie returned with Dolomite Is My Name, and later projects, the energy was different. The hunger to prove himself was gone. In its place was a calmer confidence, someone who learned that survival sometimes means walking off stage while you still can. His story is a reminder that health isn't only about organs and ambulances. Sometimes it's about knowing when your soul is tired and choosing rest before the world forces it on you. Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg has always carried two lives in one body. To the public, he's the smooth, unbothered icon, cool voice, long stride jokes ready at the edge of every sentence. For decades, he has moved through American culture like a low-riding anthem, seemingly untouchable. But behind that relaxed swagger is a man who has endured a kind of pain that doesn't announce itself on red carpets, the slow, heavy ache of loss, and the health wake-up calls that come when you've lived hard and long. The deepest cut in recent years was the death of his mother, Beverly Tate. She passed away in late October 2021 at age 70, after a period of illness that Snoop had hinted at earlier that year when he shared hospital visits. When the news became real, he didn't wrap it in celebrity polish. He posted raw grief, calling her his angel and the root of everything good in him. For a grown man in his 50s, someone who has seen violence, addiction around him, and the chaos of fame, losing the person who anchored his spirit cracked something open. Grief like that doesn't fade after the funeral. It changes the air in your house, the way holidays feel, the way you hear your own thoughts at night. Snoop's response has been to honor her in the language he knows best: music. He has continued to speak about her influence, her church choir background, her insistence on faith, kindness, and family. In 2025, he even built a major gospel project around her memory, releasing it on what would have been her birthday, turning mourning into tribute and healing into sound. It's not a publicity move. It's a son trying to keep his mother's voice close. At the same time, Snoop has had to face the reality of aging and longevity. In recent years, he publicly stepped back from smoking something that was practically part of his brand, saying it was a family-driven decision. Whether fans read that as a health precaution or simply a lifestyle shift, the message is clear. He's thinking about his lungs, his future, and how long he wants to stay present for the people who still need him here. Snoop Dogg's battle isn't a single diagnosis. It's the ongoing work of carrying grief, protecting his body, and staying upright in a life that has taken a lot. And maybe that's why he resonates so strongly with older audiences, because the real fight isn't always the one the world sees. It's the one you choose to keep fighting after the spotlight goes out. Chris Rock. Chris Rock has spent his whole career turning discomfort into clarity. He's the comedian who can make a room laugh and wince in the same breath because his humor has always been rooted in real life, race, marriage, insecurity, America's contradictions, his own. To audiences who watched him grow from stand-up clubs to Bring the Pain to Hollywood, Chris has never played the untouchable superstar. He's played the truth teller, and that's why the health struggle he's faced in recent years matters. It isn't about a hidden disease. It's about what public shock can do to a human nervous system. After the 2022 Oscars incident when he was struck on stage in front of millions, Chris didn't just walk away from a headline. He walked into a long psychological aftermath. In later interviews and in his stand-up special, Selective Outrage, he described the experience as humiliating and destabilizing, something that triggered anxiety and forced him into therapy. He's spoken about replaying the moment, about the way trauma lingers when the world decides your worst day is entertainment. That kind of impact is real health territory. Stress that tightens the chest, steals sleep, makes you scan rooms differently, and makes joy feel like work. Have you ever had a public moment you couldn't escape even after everyone else moved on? What's striking is how Chris handled it. He didn't pretend it didn't hurt, and he didn't let it define him either. He did the thing he has always done best. He processed it through craft. He kept touring, kept writing, kept getting on stage, even when it would have been easier to hide. But the tone shifted. There's a sharper edge now, not meaner, just more awake. His comedy has become a place where embarrassment gets metabolized into perspective, where fear is turned into language. Chris Rock's story lands especially hard for older viewers because it touches something universal, the way one shocking incident can change your inner weather. Many people in midlife know that battles aren't always visible. Sometimes they're inside the mind, panic, shame, the slow rebuilding of confidence. Chris's openness about therapy and emotional recovery helps normalize a conversation that generations were taught to swallow. He remains funny. He remains bold. But beneath it all is a man proving that resilience isn't about never getting shaken. It's about learning how to stand in the shaking, tell the truth about it, and still step back into the light. Fantasia Barrino. Fantasia Barrino's story has never been a straight climb from talent to triumph. She burst into America's living rooms as the 19-year-old powerhouse who won American Idol in 2004, but the years after that victory were far rougher than most people realized. While the public saw a new star with a church-trained voice and a once-in-a-generation grit, Fantasia was juggling sudden fame, financial chaos, tabloid pressure, and the weight of supporting family members who depended on her long before she had the tools to protect herself. Behind the scenes, she was dealing with crushing emotional strain. She's spoken about feeling trapped by gossip, overwhelmed by responsibility, and exhausted by the constant judgment that followed every personal decision. In August 2010, that pressure reached a breaking point. Fantasia overdosed on a combination of aspirin and a sleep aid in what she later acknowledged was a suicide attempt. She was hospitalized, and the incident became a moment that forced her to confront depression head-on, not as a rumor, but as a real fight for her life. She has described that period as wanting the noise to stop the headlines, the expectations, the feeling that she could never breathe without being watched. What makes Fantasia's journey so gripping for older audiences is what followed. She didn't disappear into shame. She rebuilt slowly, stubbornly, and in public. She leaned into therapy, faith, and the grounding reality of motherhood. Over time, she reframed survival as purpose, explaining that waking up after that overdose felt like being given another assignment on Earth. In recent years, she has spoken with a clarity that only comes from walking through fire. That success means nothing if your inner life is collapsing, and that asking for help is not weakness. Her return wasn't just a career restart, it was a personal reinvention. Whether on stage or portraying Celie in the color Purple Fantasia, now performs with a steadier kind of power, one shaped by scars, not fantasy. She stands today as proof that a shattered season doesn't have to be the final chapter. Sometimes it becomes the page where the real song begins. Missy Elliott. Missy Elliott has always moved like the future. When she arrived in the mid-90s, she didn't just rap or produce, she redesigned what hip-hop and R&B could look and feel like. The videos were surreal, the beats were alien funky, and her presence was fearless. To fans who grew up watching her break every rule, Missy seemed powered by endless energy. That's why her long, quiet health battle surprised so many people. It wasn't a collapse in public. It was a slow fight behind the curtain, one that threatened the very thing she's known for: motion. Missy has lived for years with Graves' disease, an autoimmune disorder that attacks the thyroid. She's said she was diagnosed around 2008 after frightening symptoms began to take over. Shaking hands, rapid weight changes, exhaustion so heavy it felt like her body was unplugged, and dizziness that made simple tasks risky. Graves' can turn everyday life into a balancing act. Your heart races while your muscles weaken. Your mind stays alert while your body runs out of fuel. For an artist whose craft depends on stamina, studio focus, and stage performance, it was a brutal matchup. She has described moments when she couldn't hold a pen steady, couldn't drive safely, and couldn't trust her body to do what her imagination demanded. Have you ever had a season where your mind was ready to go, but your body refused to cooperate? Instead of dramatizing the struggle, Missy went inward. She stepped away from the spotlight at times, adjusted her schedule, and followed treatment that included medication and lifestyle changes. What looked to outsiders like disappearing was actually survival work, learning how to live with a condition that flares unpredictably and punishes overwork. And when she returned, she didn't come back smaller, she came back sharper. Her later appearances, whether a surprise performance, a new feature, or a major award moment, felt like proof that healing doesn't erase greatness, it refines it. Missy's story matters because it shows a different kind of strength than we usually celebrate. Not the loud kind that never pauses, but the wise kind that listens, adapts, and keeps creating anyway. She turned a private illness into a public example. Your body may change the tempo, but it doesn't get to cancel your song. Queen Latifah. Queen Latifah has always carried herself like someone who knows exactly who she is. From the moment she broke through as a rapper with a throne-sized voice and a message of self-respect, she represented a kind of grounded confidence that felt rare in entertainment. Then she expanded into acting, producing, hosting, moving effortlessly between worlds while keeping that same steady core. To many fans who've followed her since the late 80s, Latifah isn't just a star. She's a symbol of grown woman composure, capable, elegant, and unafraid to stand tall in her own skin. But the calm we see on camera has been forged in years of private sorrow and heavy responsibility. One of the deepest wounds in her life came early. In 1992, her older brother, Lancelot Owens, was killed in a motorcycle accident. Latifah has spoken about how that loss knocked the breath out of her world and left her struggling with depression. Grief didn't arrive as a single moment. It became a long shadow, the kind that follows you into quiet rooms and unexpected anniversaries. For someone still building a career, that heartbreak could have derailed everything. Instead, she kept working while carrying pain that most of the public never saw. Later, another long, exhausting chapter unfolded: caregiving. Latifah became a primary support system for her mother, Rita Owens, who lived for years with serious health decline. Watching a parent fade is a specific kind of ache, slow, daily, and relentless. It tests patience, sleep, finances, emotional balance, even your sense of identity. Latifah continued to create, perform, and show up for audiences while living inside that reality. She rarely made it a spectacle, but she never pretended it was easy. Her mother passed away in 2022, closing a chapter that had required courage in ways fame can't prepare you for. What makes Queen Latifah's health story important isn't a headline diagnosis. It's the wear and tear of loss, the mental weight of mourning, the emotional fatigue of caregiving, and the quiet discipline it takes to stay whole while holding other people up. Her legacy shines not only because of her awards or roles, but because she has shown what it looks like to endure real life without losing your dignity. In a world that often celebrates only visible success, Latifah reminds us that some of the hardest work happens off stage and that it still shapes greatness. Gabrielle Union. Gabrielle Union has always carried a rare blend of glamour and grit. To many Americans, she's the effortlessly radiant star from Bring It On, Bad Boys 2, and Being Mary Jane. But beneath that polished surface is a woman who has spent decades wrestling with pain that never showed up in movie trailers. Her health battles aren't the kind you spot on a red carpet. They're the kind that live in the body and the nervous system, quietly shaping a life. Union has been honest about surviving sexual assault at 19, an experience that left long-term psychological scars. Years later, she described living with PTSD, explaining that trauma doesn't expire just because time passes or success arrives. It can change sleep trust, intimacy, and the way you move through the world. Instead of hiding, she chose to speak, using her platform to challenge the silence that traps so many survivors. That courage matters especially for people who grew up in generations where keeping it private was expected even when it hurt. Her physical journey toward motherhood was another storm. After years of trying to conceive, Gabrielle revealed she endured 8 or 9 miscarriages. Doctors repeatedly blamed age, but the deeper cause wasn't found right away. Eventually, she was diagnosed with adenomyosis, a painful uterine condition linked to infertility and repeated pregnancy loss. Imagine the toll, hope rising, then collapsing again and again while still showing up for work cameras, and a public that assumes smiling means fine. She has described the process as exhausting, expensive, and emotionally brutal, but also clarifying it taught her to demand better care and to trust her body when professionals didn't listen. Have you ever fought for something so long that you started questioning whether your dream was still allowed to be yours? In 2018, Gabrielle and Dwyane Wade chose surrogacy, and on November 7th that year, they welcomed their daughter, Kavya James Wade. Union has said motherhood arriving later in life felt like a gift earned through survival, not just fertility survival, but emotional healing too. In recent reflections, she's talked about breaking generational cycles, saying that becoming a parent in her 40s let her show up with more patience, self-knowledge, and softness than she might have earlier. Gabrielle Union's story fits the title because her battles were real serious and largely invisible until she decided to name them. She reminds us that resilience isn't about pretending life didn't wound you. It's about choosing truth, choosing help, and still building joy on the far side of heartbreak. Today on Legends of Black Excellence, these stories aren't gossip, they're mirrors. Denzel learning to slow down, Janet guarding her voice. Whoopi surviving sepsis. Serena fighting for postpartum care. Tony touring with lupus. Missy managing Graves' Fantasia, rebuilding after depression. Tracy rising from trauma. Eddie choosing rest. Snoop carrying grief. Chris healing in public. Gabrielle enduring loss. Each proves fame doesn't cancel fragility. Yet a debate remains. Do public figures owe us full transparency about their health to educate and protect fans? Or is privacy the last human right they should fiercely defend in this rumor-hungry media age? What do you think?